The church was heavy with the scent of lilies and secrets. I stood at the front, hands trembling, as mourners filed past my husband's casket, some with tears, some with whispers, all with eyes that wouldn't quite meet mine. I thought I was prepared for anything that day. I thought the worst was over. But when she pressed that envelope into my palm, her eyes burning with something I couldn't name, I realized the real story was just beginning. My name is Laverne Holloway, and for 27 years I was the wife of Charles Chuck Holloway, a man who could charm a room and break a heart in the same breath. We built a life together in the heart of Atlanta, raised 2 children, and weathered storms I thought would drown us both. But nothing prepared me for the storm that would come after his death. The funeral was a blur of faces. Family, friends, old neighbors, and people I barely recognized. I moved through it all like a ghost, clutching my daughter's hand, trying to keep my head above water. Chuck had been sick for months, but the end still came too fast. I'd spent those last days at his bedside, holding his hand, whispering prayers, hoping for a miracle that never came. As the service ended, I stood by the casket, accepting condolences. That's when I saw her. She was younger than me, maybe by a decade, with skin the color of honey and eyes that didn't flinch. She wore a black dress that fit too well, and her hair was pulled back in a sleek bun. She waited until the line thinned, then stepped forward, her heels clicking on the church floor. "Mrs. Holloway," she said, her voice low and steady. "I'm sorry for your loss." I nodded, too numb to speak. She leaned in, her perfume sharp and unfamiliar, and pressed a sealed envelope into my hand. "He wanted you to have this," she whispered. "Please read it when you're alone." Before I could respond, she turned and walked away, her back straight, her head high. I stared at the envelope, my heart pounding. There was no name on it, just my initials, written in Chuck's unmistakable scrawl. I slipped the letter into my purse, my mind racing. Who was she? How did she know my husband? And what could possibly be in that envelope that couldn't wait until after he was gone? The rest of the day passed in a haze. I went through the motions, greeting guests, thanking the pastor, making sure my children were okay. But my thoughts kept drifting back to the woman in black, and the letter burning a hole in my bag. That night, after the last casserole had been put away and the house was finally quiet, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the envelope. My hands shook as I broke the seal, unfolding the single sheet of paper inside. "Laverne, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but there are things you need to know. Things I should have told you long ago. I'm sorry for the pain I've caused. Please don't hate me for what you're about to learn. Chuck." My breath caught in my throat. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I read the letter again, searching for answers, for explanations, for anything that would make sense of the last few months. But there was nothing. Just an apology and a warning that my world was about to change. I sat there for a long time, the letter trembling in my hands. I thought about the woman at the funeral, about the way she looked at me, not with pity but with something closer to understanding. I wondered what secrets she carried, what truths she knew about my husband that I never would. The next morning, I woke to the sound of rain tapping against the window. I moved through the house in a daze, making coffee, checking on my children, trying to pretend that everything was normal. But nothing felt normal. The letter sat on the kitchen table, a silent reminder that my life was no longer my own. Later that day, as I was sorting through sympathy cards and flowers, my phone buzzed. An unknown number flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Mrs. Holloway?" The voice was soft, familiar. "This is Simone. We met yesterday at the funeral." I gripped the phone, my heart racing. "Yes, I remember. There's more you need to know," she said. "Can we meet?" I agreed, my curiosity outweighing my fear. We arranged to meet at a small cafe downtown, away from prying eyes and familiar faces. I arrived early, my nerves jangling. Simone walked in a few minutes later, her posture as poised as ever. She sat across from me, her hands folded neatly on the table. "I loved him too," she said quietly. "But he wasn't the man you thought he was. There are things you need to see, things he left behind for you." She slid a small box across the table. Inside were photographs, letters, and a key. My hands trembled as I sifted through the contents, each item a piece of a puzzle I never knew existed. Simone watched me, her eyes full of sympathy and something else, relief maybe, or the weight of secrets finally shared. "He wanted you to know the truth," she said. "All of it." I left the cafe with the box clutched to my chest, my mind spinning. The letter, the box, the key, each one a doorway to a past I never imagined. I knew that opening those doors would change everything, but I also knew I couldn't turn back. I drove home in a fog, the box Simone had given me resting on the passenger seat like a silent passenger. The city blurred past my window, neon lights and rain-slick streets reflecting the confusion swirling inside me. I kept replaying her words. "He wanted you to know the truth. All of it." Over and over, as if I could find a hidden meaning if I just listened hard enough. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked different, almost unfamiliar. I sat in the car for a long moment, watching the porch light flicker in the drizzle, wondering if I was ready to face whatever waited inside that box. But the need for answers was stronger than my fear. I grabbed the box and hurried inside, locking the door behind me. The house was quiet, my children asleep upstairs, the only sound the ticking of the old clock in the hallway. I set the box on the kitchen table, next to Chuck's letter, and took a deep breath. My hand shook as I opened it again, spreading the contents out in front of me. There were photographs, some of Chuck and Simone together, smiling in places I'd never been, at restaurants I'd never heard of, on vacations I never knew he'd taken. There were letters, too, written in Chuck's handwriting, addressed to Simone, full of words I'd never heard him say to me. Words of love, of regret, of promises made and broken. But it was the key that caught my attention. It was small and silver, attached to a tag with an address written in Simone's neat script. I stared at it, my mind racing. What was I supposed to find there? What else had Chuck hidden from me? I sat back in my chair, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. I thought about the years I'd spent with Chuck, the birthdays, the anniversaries, the quiet nights on the porch. I thought about the fights, the silences, the times I'd wondered if he was really where he said he was. I'd always pushed those doubts aside, telling myself that love meant trust, that marriage meant forgiveness. But now, with the evidence laid out before me, I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. I picked up one of the letters, my eyes scanning the familiar loops and slants of Chuck's handwriting. "Simone, I know I've made a mess of things. I never wanted to hurt you or Laverne or the kids. I wish I could go back and do it all differently, but I can't. All I can do now is try to make things right. If anything happens to me, please give Laverne the box. She deserves to know the truth, even if it breaks her heart. Chuck." I pressed the letter to my chest, tears streaming down my face. I felt anger, grief, and a strange sense of relief all at once. At least now I knew. At least now I could stop wondering. The next morning I called Simone. My voice was steadier than I expected. "I found the key," I said. "What's at the address?" She was quiet for a moment. "It's a storage unit. Chuck kept things there. Things he didn't want anyone to find. I never had a key. He said it was for you if anything ever happened." I wrote down the address, my heart pounding. "Will you come with me?" She agreed, and we met later that afternoon at a small storage facility on the edge of the city. The air was thick with humidity, the sky heavy with the threat of more rain. Simone waited by the gate, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. We walked together down a row of metal doors, the key cold in my hand. I found the unit with the matching number and slid the key into the lock. My hands trembled as I turned it, the door creaking open to reveal a small, dimly lit space. Inside were boxes, a suitcase, and a battered safe. I knelt down, opening the boxes one by one. There were more photographs, more letters, and stacks of documents, bank statements, property deeds, insurance policies. I recognized some of the names, but others were unfamiliar. Simone helped me sort through the papers, her hands steady even as mine shook. "He was trying to protect you," she said quietly. "He made mistakes, but he wanted you to have everything you needed." I found a folder labeled for Laverne. Inside was another letter, this one longer, more detailed. "Laverne, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I know I should have told you everything, but I was afraid. Afraid of losing you, afraid of facing the truth. I made choices I can't take back, but I want you to have the life you deserve. Everything in this unit is yours. The accounts, the properties, the insurance, they're all in your name now. I hope you can forgive me someday. Chuck. I sat on the cold concrete floor, the letter trembling in my hands. Simone sat beside me, her presence a strange comfort. He loved you, she said softly. In his own way, he loved both of us. I nodded, unable to speak. The truth was messy, complicated, and painful, but it was also freeing. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. We left the storage unit together. The weight of secrets finally lifted. Simone hugged me before she left, her eyes shining with tears. Take care of yourself, Laverne. You deserve happiness. I watched her drive away, the box of memories clutched to my chest. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I was ready to face it, on my own terms with my eyes wide open. The days after visiting the storage unit passed in a strange suspended quiet. I moved through my house as if in a dream, the box of Chuck's secrets tucked away in my closet, the key now resting on my nightstand. I kept replaying the words from his letter, the way he tried to make amends from beyond the grave. I wondered if it was enough. I wondered if anything ever could be. My children, Malik and Tasha, noticed the change in me. They tiptoed around the house, whispering in the hallway, watching me with worried eyes. I wanted to tell them everything, to lay out the truth and let the chips fall where they may. But I couldn't, not yet. They were grieving their father, and I couldn't bear to add another weight to their hearts. Instead, I poured my energy into the practical things. I met with Chuck's lawyer, Mr. Whitaker, a patient man with kind eyes who explained the details of the accounts and properties Chuck had left behind. He wanted to make sure you and the kids were taken care of, Mr. Whitaker said, sliding a stack of documents across the desk. He made some mistakes, but he tried to do right by you in the end. I nodded, signing where he pointed, my mind only half on the paperwork. The numbers on the pages didn't feel real. Bank balances, property deeds, insurance payouts. It was more than I'd ever imagined, more than Chuck had ever let on. I felt a strange mix of gratitude and resentment. Why had he kept all this from me? Why had he trusted me with it only after he was gone? That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I pulled out one of Chuck's letters, reading it by the soft glow of the lamp. Laverne, I know I should have told you everything. I was scared. I thought I could fix it all before you found out, but I ran out of time. I hope you can use what I've left to build the life you always deserved. I hope you can forgive me, even if I don't deserve it. Chuck. I folded the letter, tears slipping down my cheeks. I didn't know if I could forgive him, not yet, but I knew I had to try. For myself, for my children, for the life that was still ahead of me. A few days later, Simone called. Her voice was gentle, hesitant. I just wanted to check on you, she said. I know this isn't easy. I hesitated, then found myself saying, would you like to meet for coffee? We met at the same cafe as before, the air between us less tense this time. We talked about Chuck, about the years we'd both spent loving a man who was never truly ours. Simone told me about the good times, the laughter, the dreams they'd shared. I listened, surprised to find that her stories didn't make me angry. Instead, they filled in the blanks of a life I'd only ever seen from one side. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness, Simone said quietly. I just wanted you to know that you're not alone. We both lost him. We both have to find a way to move on. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of kinship with her. We were two women bound by grief, by betrayal, by the complicated love of a complicated man. Afterward, I walked through the city, letting the noise and bustle wash over me. I thought about the future, about what I wanted, about who I wanted to be now that the truth was out. For so long, I defined myself as Chuck's wife, as Malik and Tasha's mother. But now, for the first time in decades, I had to figure out who Laverne Holloway was on her own. That weekend, I took the kids to the park. We sat on a bench watching the ducks glide across the pond, the sun warm on our faces. Malik leaned against my shoulder, his voice soft. You okay, Mama? I smiled, brushing his hair back from his forehead. I'm getting there, baby. One day at a time. Tasha squeezed my hand, her eyes searching mine. We're here for you, Mama. Whatever you need. I hugged them both, feeling the strength of our little family. We'd been through so much, but we were still standing. We were still together. That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time in years. I wrote about Chuck, about Simone, about the secrets and the pain and the hope that maybe, just maybe, I could build something new from the ashes. I wrote about forgiveness, not just for Chuck, but for myself. For all the times I'd ignored my instincts. For all the ways I'd let fear keep me silent. As the days turned into weeks, I started to make changes. I redecorated the house, painting the walls a soft blue, hanging new curtains in the living room. I went back to church, finding comfort in the familiar hymns and the warmth of the congregation. I joined a book club, started volunteering at the community center, and even signed up for a cooking class. Slowly I began to feel like myself again, or maybe for the first time I was discovering who I really was. Spring crept into Atlanta with a gentle warmth, coaxing the dogwoods to bloom and filling the air with the promise of new beginnings. I found myself waking up with a little more energy, a little more hope. The house, once heavy with grief and secrets, now felt lighter. I opened the windows, let the breeze in, and played old records while I cooked breakfast for Malik and Tasha. We were learning how to be a family again, just the three of us. One Saturday morning, I decided to tackle the attic. It was a job I'd put off for years, always telling myself I'd get to it one day. Now, with the sun streaming through the window and the kids at a friend's house, I felt ready. I climbed the creaky stairs, heart pounding, and started sorting through boxes of memories. Old photo albums, school projects, Chuck's high school trophies, and stacks of letters tied with faded ribbon. As I sifted through the past, I found a small box I didn't recognize. Inside were more letters, but these were addressed to me, in Chuck's handwriting. My hand shook as I opened the first one. Laverne, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I know I left you with more questions than answers, and I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I loved you, even when I didn't know how to show it. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me, and to find happiness again. Chuck. I read every letter, tears streaming down my face. Some were apologies, some were memories, some were just rambling thoughts from a man who knew he was running out of time. Each one was a piece of the puzzle, a glimpse into the heart of the man I'd loved and lost. After I finished, I sat in the attic for a long time, letting the sunlight warm my face. I realized that forgiveness wasn't a single act. It was a process, a choice I'd have to make every day. I didn't know if I was ready to forgive Chuck completely, but I was ready to start. That afternoon I called Simone. I found more letters, I told her. He wrote to me too. She was quiet for a moment. He was always writing. I think it was his way of trying to make sense of things. We met for coffee again, and this time the conversation was easier. We talked about our lives, our dreams, the things we wanted for ourselves and our children. Simone told me she was thinking about moving to New Orleans starting fresh. I need a new chapter, she said, her eyes bright with hope. I understood. I was starting to want a new chapter too. As the weeks passed, I found myself reaching out more, to friends, to family, to the community I'd neglected while I was lost in grief. I joined a support group for widows, where I met women who understood the strange mix of sorrow and relief that comes with losing a complicated love. We laughed, we cried, we shared stories and recipes and advice. I realized I wasn't alone, and that was a comfort I hadn't known I needed. Malik and Tasha thrived too. Malik made the basketball team, and Tasha started writing poetry, her words full of longing and hope. We celebrated their victories, big and small, and leaned on each other when the days were hard. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the fireflies, Tasha turned to me. Mama, do you think Daddy loved us? I took her hand, squeezing it gently. I know he did, baby. He had his own struggles. But he loved you, and he loved Malik, and he loved me in his own way. She nodded, her eyes shining with tears. I miss him. I do too, I whispered. But we're going to be okay. We're going to make it. That night I wrote in my journal, pouring out my fears and hopes and dreams. I wrote about forgiveness, about letting go of anger, about finding peace in the midst of chaos. I wrote about the future I wanted for myself and my children, a future filled with love, laughter, and the courage to keep moving forward. As spring turned to summer, I felt a sense of renewal. I planted a garden in the backyard, filling it with tomatoes, peppers, and sunflowers. I invited friends over for cookouts, filled the house with music and laughter, and let myself believe that happiness was possible again. One afternoon, as I watered the garden, Simone called. "I'm leaving for New Orleans next week," she said. "I just wanted to say goodbye." We met one last time, hugging tightly, both of us crying and laughing at the same time. "Thank you, Laverne," she said, "for listening, for understanding, for not hating me." I smiled, wiping away a tear. "Thank you for telling me the truth. I hope you find what you're looking for." As I watched her walk away, I felt a sense of closure. The past was behind me, and the future was wide open. I was ready to step into it one day at a time. Summer in Atlanta was always thick with heat and possibility. The garden I planted in the spring was now bursting with color, and the house was filled with the scent of fresh tomatoes and basil. Malik and Tasha spent their days running through sprinklers, riding bikes with friends, and coming home with stories and sunburns. I watched them, grateful for their laughter, for the way they brought life back into our home. I found myself changing too. I started waking up early, taking long walks through the neighborhood, waving to neighbors I'd barely spoken to before. I joined a yoga class at the community center, learning to breathe through the aches and the memories. I even started baking again, filling the kitchen with the smell of cinnamon rolls and peach cobbler, just like my mama used to do. One afternoon, as I was kneading dough, Malik wandered into the kitchen. He watched me for a moment, then asked, "Mama, do you ever get lonely?" I paused, wiping flour from my hands. "Sometimes, baby. But I'm learning to enjoy my own company. And I have you and Tasha. That's more than enough." He nodded, thoughtful. "I miss Daddy, but I like it when you smile." His words stayed with me. I realized that for so long I'd been waiting for someone else to make me happy. Chuck, the kids, even Simone. But happiness was something I had to find for myself. That weekend, I hosted a barbecue for friends and neighbors. The backyard was alive with music and laughter, the grill sizzling with burgers and ribs. Geneva, my neighbor from down the street, brought her famous potato salad, and the ladies from church arrived with pies and sweet tea. We ate, we danced, we told stories late into the night. As the stars came out, I sat on the porch with Geneva, watching the children chase fireflies. She turned to me, her eyes full of warmth. "You're doing good, Laverne. I can see the light coming back in you." I smiled, feeling the truth of her words. "It's been a long road, but I'm starting to feel like myself again." She squeezed my hand. "That's all any of us can do. Keep moving forward." The days passed in a blur of sunshine and small victories. I finished the cooking class I'd started in the spring, surprising myself with new recipes and a confidence I hadn't felt in years. I even entered a baking contest at the county fair, winning second place for my sweet potato pie. Malik and Tasha cheered me on, their pride shining brighter than any ribbon. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Tasha announced she wanted to write a book about our family. "There's so much to tell, Mama. About Daddy, about you, about everything we've been through." I laughed, ruffling her hair. "Maybe you should. Maybe we all should." That night, I pulled out my journal and started writing in earnest. I wrote about Chuck, the good, the bad, the complicated love we'd shared. I wrote about Simone, about forgiveness, about the way secrets can shape a life. I wrote about Malik and Tasha, about the strength I saw in them, about the hope they gave me every single day. As the summer wore on, I found myself looking forward to each new day. I planned a trip to the beach with the kids, something we'd always talked about but never done. We packed the car with snacks and swimsuits, drove down to the coast, and spent 3 days building sandcastles, swimming in the ocean, and watching the sunset together. On the last night, as we sat on the balcony listening to the waves, Malik leaned against me. "I'm glad we came, Mama. I feel like Daddy's watching us, smiling." I hugged him close, my heart full. Me too, baby. Me too. When we returned home, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The house was still full of memories, but they no longer hurt the way they once did. I realized that I'd built something new. A life that was mine, a family that was strong, a future that was bright. One afternoon, as I watered the garden, Niva stopped by with a letter. "This came for you," she said, handing me an envelope with a New Orleans postmark. I opened it, my hands trembling. It was from Simone. She wrote about her new life in New Orleans, about the friends she'd made, about the peace she was finally finding. She thanked me again for my kindness, for my understanding, for the way we'd both managed to forgive and move forward. I smiled, tucking the letter into my journal. I realized then that forgiveness wasn't just about letting go of the past. It was about making room for the future. As the sun set over Atlanta, I sat on the porch with Malik and Tasha, watching the sky turn pink and gold. I felt grateful for the pain, for the healing, for the chance to start again. The first hints of autumn crept into the air, and with them came a sense of quiet reflection. I found myself thinking more about the journey I'd taken since Chuck's funeral. The heartbreak, the secrets, the unexpected friendships, and the slow, steady return of hope. The pain was still there, but it no longer controlled me. It was just one part of a much bigger story. Malik started high school that September, his shoulders a little broader, his voice a little deeper. Tasha joined the school's poetry club, her notebooks filling with verses about love, loss, and the strength she saw in the women around her. I watched them both with pride, knowing that despite everything, they were growing into kind, resilient young people. One Saturday, I decided to visit Chuck's grave for the first time since the funeral. I brought a bouquet of sunflowers, his favorite, and stood quietly, letting the memories wash over me. I spoke to him softly, telling him about the kids, about the garden, about the ways I was learning to forgive. I told him I hoped he'd found peace, and that I was finally finding it too. On my way home, I stopped by the community center to drop off some baked goods for a fundraiser. Niva was there, organizing tables and chatting with the volunteers. She waved me over, her smile as warm as ever. "Laverne, you're just in time. We need someone to judge the pie contest," she said, winking. I laughed, grateful for the distraction. The afternoon passed in a blur of laughter, stories, and the sweet taste of homemade desserts. I realized how much I'd come to rely on these moments, simple, joyful, shared with people who cared. That evening, as I walked home, I thought about the letter Simone had sent from New Orleans. I decided to write her back, sharing news of the kids, the garden, and the small victories that made up my days. I told her about the support group, about the book Tasha wanted to write, about the way forgiveness had changed us both. A few weeks later, I received a reply. Simone wrote about her new job at a local library, about the jazz music that drifted through her open windows at night, about the peace she was finally finding. She thanked me again for my understanding, for the way we both managed to let go of anger and choose something better. As the leaves turned gold and red, I found myself looking forward to the future. I started teaching a baking class at the community center, sharing my mama's recipes and the stories that went with them. The women in the class became friends, confidants, a new kind of family. We laughed, we cried, we supported each other through the ups and downs of life. One evening after class, Niva pulled me aside. "You know, Laverne, you've become a light in this community. People look up to you. They see your strength." I smiled, feeling the truth of her words settle deep in my heart. "I never thought I'd get here, Niva. There were days I didn't think I'd make it." She squeezed my hand. "But you did. And you're helping others do the same." That night I sat on the porch watching the stars blink to life in the autumn sky. Malik and Tasha joined me, their laughter filling the air. I realized that, for the first time in a long time, I was content. The pain of the past was still there, but it was no longer the whole story. There was room now for joy, for hope, for new beginnings. As the months passed, I continued to write in my journal, capturing the lessons I'd learned, the blessings I'd received, the hope that had carried me through. I wrote about Chuck, about Simone, about the power of forgiveness and the importance of community. I wrote about Malik and Tasha, about the pride I felt in watching them grow, about the love that bound us together. I realized that my story wasn't just about loss. It was about resilience, about the courage to keep moving forward, about the beauty that can come from even the darkest moments. The days grew shorter, and the air turned crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves. I found comfort in the rhythm of the seasons, in the way life kept moving forward no matter what storms had passed. My house, once a place of tension and grief, now felt like a sanctuary, a place where laughter echoed in the halls and the kitchen was always warm. Malik was thriving in high school, making new friends and joining the basketball team. I cheered from the bleachers at every game, my heart swelling with pride as he raced down the court, his face lit with determination. Tasha's poetry blossomed, her words finding their way into the school newspaper, and even winning a local contest. She read her winning poem at a community event, her voice steady and clear, and I saw the strength in her that I'd always hoped to pass on. One chilly evening, I hosted a small dinner for Geneva and a few of the women from my baking class. We gathered around the table, sharing stories and laughter over bowls of gumbo and slices of sweet potato pie. The conversation turned to family, to the ways we all carried scars and secrets, to the power of forgiveness. Geneva raised her glass. To Laverne for showing us that healing is possible, even when it seems out of reach. I blushed, but I felt the truth of her words. Healing wasn't a straight line, it was a journey, full of setbacks and small victories, of letting go and holding on. I looked around the table at the women who had become my friends, my sisters, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. After dinner, as we cleared the dishes, Geneva pulled me aside. You ever think about telling your story, Laverne? Really telling it? I think a lot of people could learn from what you've been through. I thought about Tasha's idea for a family book, about the journal I'd been keeping, about the women in my support group who'd found comfort in my words. Maybe Geneva was right. Maybe it was time to share my story, not just for myself, but for anyone who needed to know that hope was possible. That night, I sat at my desk and began to write in earnest. I wrote about Chuck, the man I'd loved, the mistakes he'd made, the secrets he'd kept. I wrote about Simone, about the pain and the unexpected friendship that had grown between us. I wrote about Malik and Tasha, about the way they taught me to keep going, to keep loving, to keep believing in the future. As I wrote, I felt the weight of the past begin to lift. The pain was still there, but it was no longer the center of my story. There was room now for joy, for forgiveness, for the possibility of new beginnings. The holidays approached, and the house filled with the smells of cinnamon and pine, the sound of music and laughter. We decorated the tree together, hung stockings on the mantel, and invited friends and neighbors to share in our celebrations. I realized that for the first time in years I was looking forward to the future. Not with fear but with hope. On Christmas Eve, after the last guest had gone and the house was quiet, I sat by the fire with Malik and Tasha. We talked about the year that had passed, about the challenges we'd faced and the ways we'd grown. I told them how proud I was, how much I loved them, how grateful I was for the family we'd become. Tasha leaned against me, her voice soft. I think Daddy would be proud of us too. I smiled, tears in my eyes. I think so, baby. I think so. As the fire crackled and the snow fell softly outside, I whispered a prayer of gratitude, for the pain, for the healing, for the chance to start again. I knew there would still be hard days, still be moments when the past crept in and tried to steal my peace. But I also knew that I was stronger now, more resilient, more determined to protect what mattered most. The new year dawned with a quiet hopefulness. I made a promise to myself. This would be the year I truly let go of the pain and stepped fully into the life I was building. I kept writing, pouring my story onto the pages, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing, always feeling lighter with every word. Malik and Tasha encouraged me, reading over my shoulder, offering suggestions, and reminding me that our story was worth telling. One afternoon, I received a letter from Simone. She wrote about her new life in New Orleans, about the friends she'd made and the peace she was finally finding. She told me she'd started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping others find their footing after loss. Your strength inspired me, Laverne, she wrote. If you ever want to visit, my door is always open. I smiled as I read her words, grateful for the strange, unexpected bond we'd formed. I realized that forgiveness had not only freed me from the past, but had also given me a new friend, someone who understood the complicated love and pain we'd both carried. As winter melted into spring, I finished the first draft of my memoir. Geneva and the women from my baking class gathered in my living room for a reading. I was nervous, my hands shaking as I turned the pages, but their encouragement gave me courage. I read about Chuck's funeral, about the letter Simone handed me, about the secrets that unraveled my world and the strength I found in putting it back together. When I finished, the room was quiet for a moment, then filled with applause and hugs. Geneva wiped a tear from her eye. You have to share this, Laverne. There are so many women who need to hear it. Promised I would. I started looking for a publisher, sending out query letters and sample chapters. The process was slow, full of rejections and doubts, but I kept going. Each no was just a step closer to a yes. I believed in my story, and I believed in myself. Meanwhile, life at home continued to blossom. Malik was accepted into an honors program at school, and Tasha's poetry was published in a local magazine. We celebrated with a special dinner, laughing and telling stories late into the night. I realized that despite everything we'd lost, we'd gained so much more. A deeper love, a stronger bond, a sense of resilience that nothing could shake. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Malik turned to me. Mama, do you ever wish things had turned out different? I thought about his question, about all the pain and all the healing, about the road we'd traveled to get here. Sometimes, I admitted. But then I look at where we are now, and I know every step, good and bad, brought us here. We're stronger for it. We're wiser. And we're together. He nodded, a gentle smile on his lips. I'm grateful for you, Mama. For your strength. For your love. I hope I can be half the person you are. I squeezed his hand, my heart full. You already are, Malik. You already are. As the days grew longer and the world grew brighter, I found myself looking forward to each new adventure. I started teaching a second baking class, this time for teenagers, sharing not just recipes but lessons about life, love, and resilience. The kitchen was filled with laughter and flour, the air thick with the scent of cinnamon and hope. Geneva remained my closest friend, my confidant, my sister in everything but blood. We shared our hopes and our fears, our triumphs and our failures, always lifting each other up. I realized that family isn't just the people you're born to. It's the people who choose you, who stand by you, who love you through every storm. As spring turned to summer, I received a call from a small publishing house. They wanted to publish my memoir. I was stunned, overjoyed, and a little scared. But I knew this was the next step in my journey. A chance to share my story, to help others find hope in their own darkness. The day my book was released, I held it in my hands, the cover warm and smooth beneath my fingers. Malik and Tasha hugged me, their pride shining brighter than any award. Geneva hosted a book party at the community center, inviting friends, neighbors, and even Simone, who made the trip from New Orleans to celebrate with us. As I stood at the front of the room, reading the first chapter aloud, I felt the weight of the past lift away. I realized that my story wasn't just about loss. It was about courage to keep moving forward. The book party at the community center was more than I ever could have imagined. Friends, neighbors, and even a few strangers gathered to celebrate, their faces glowing with pride and excitement. Malik and Tasha helped set up the tables, arranging stacks of my memoir next to trays of homemade cookies and slices of sweet potato pie. Geneva floated through the room, making sure everyone felt welcome, her laughter ringing out above the hum of conversation. Simone arrived just as the party was getting started. She wore a bright yellow dress and carried a bouquet of wildflowers. When she saw me, she smiled, a real genuine smile that spoke of healing and hope. We hugged, holding each other tight, and I felt a sense of closure, a sense that the past had finally loosened its grip on both of us. During the reading, I looked out at the crowd and saw so many faces that had been part of my journey. Geneva, who had been my anchor, Simone, who had become my unexpected friend, the women from my baking class, who had shared their own stories of loss and resilience, and of course Malik and Tasha, whose love had carried me through the darkest days. I read a passage from the chapter about Chuck's funeral, about the moment Simone handed me the letter that changed everything. My voice trembled, but I kept going, determined to honor the truth of my story. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment, then filled with applause and tears. After the reading, people lined up to have their books signed. Some shared their own stories of heartbreak and healing. Others simply thanked me for giving them hope. I realized then that my pain had not been in vain. It had become a source of strength, a way to help others find their own courage. As the party wound down, Simone and I slipped outside for a quiet moment. We sat on the steps of the community center, watching the sun set over the city. "I'm proud of you, Laverne," Simone said, her voice soft. "You turned your pain into something beautiful." I smiled, feeling the truth of her words settle deep in my heart. "We both did, Simone. We both found a way to move forward." She nodded, her eyes shining. "I never thought I'd find peace after everything that happened, but seeing your family, it gives me hope." We hugged again, and I knew that whatever the future held, we would always share a bond forged in pain, but strengthened by forgiveness and understanding. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the journey I'd taken, the heartbreak, the secrets, the healing, and the hope. I realized that my story was far from over. There would be new challenges, new joys, new lessons to learn. But I was ready for whatever came next. The weeks that followed were filled with new opportunities. I was invited to speak at local libraries, churches, and women's groups, sharing my story and encouraging others to find their own strength. Malik and Tasha came with me to some of the events, their pride shining in their eyes as they listened to me speak. One afternoon, after a talk at a nearby church, a woman approached me with tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Laverne," she said. "Your story gave me the courage to leave a situation I thought I'd never escape. You reminded me that it's never too late to start over." Her words stayed with me, a reminder that our stories have the power to change lives. Not just our own, but the lives of those who hear them. At home, life continued to blossom. Malik graduated from high school with honors, and Tasha's poetry was published in a national magazine. We celebrated with a family dinner, laughing and telling stories late into the night. I realized that despite everything we'd lost, we'd gained so much more. A deeper love, a stronger bond, a sense of resilience that nothing could shake. Geneva remained my closest friend, always ready with a listening ear and a word of encouragement. We spent our afternoons baking, gardening, and planning new ways to give back to the community. Our friendship was a reminder that sometimes, the family you choose is just as important as the one you're born into. As summer turned to fall, I found myself looking forward to each new day. I knew there would still be hard times, still be moments when the past crept in and tried to steal my peace. But I also knew that I was stronger now, more resilient, more determined to protect what mattered most. Because I was not alone. I had my children, my friends, my community. I had myself. The first chill of autumn crept into the city, and with it came a new kind of energy. I was busier than ever. Between book events, Malik's college applications, and Tasha's poetry readings, our days were full. But it was a good kind of busy, the kind that made the house feel alive. I found myself looking forward to the sound of the front door opening, to the stories my children brought home, to the laughter that now came so easily. One Saturday, I was invited to speak at a women's retreat just outside Atlanta. The drive out of the city was peaceful, the trees along the highway already turning gold and red. I arrived early, nerves fluttering in my stomach. The room was filled with women of all ages, some with notebooks, others just holding coffee and hope. I told them about the letter at Chuck's funeral, about the secrets that unraveled my marriage, about the day I met Simone and how two women who should have been enemies became each other's lifeline. After my talk, a woman named Patrice approached me. She was quiet, her hands twisting a tissue, but her eyes were fierce. "How did you not let bitterness take over?" she asked. "How did you keep from hating them both?" I thought about it for a moment. "I didn't at first," I admitted. "I was angry. I was hurt. But I realized that holding on to that pain was only hurting me. I had to let it go, not for them but for myself. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to move forward, even when you remember everything. Patrice nodded, tears in her eyes. Thank you. I needed to hear that. That night, I drove home under a sky full of stars, feeling lighter than I had in years. When I walked in, Malik was at the kitchen table, surrounded by college brochures. Tasha was curled up on the couch, scribbling in her notebook. I sat with them, listening to their dreams, their worries, their plans for the future. I realized that, for the first time, I was excited for what was next, not just for them but for me too. A few days later, I received a call from a local radio station. They wanted to interview me about my book, about the journey from betrayal to healing. The host, a woman named Denise, asked questions that dug deep, about trust, about starting over, about what I'd learned from loving someone who wasn't always honest. Do you think you'll ever love again? Denise asked, her voice gentle. I laughed, surprised by the question. I don't know. Maybe. I'm open to it. But I'm not waiting for someone else to make me whole. I've learned how to do that for myself. The interview aired the next morning, and my phone buzzed with messages from friends, from women in my support group, even from Simone. You sounded strong, she texted. I'm proud of you. That weekend, Geneva and I hosted a small dinner for the women from my baking class. We cooked together, filling the house with the smell of roasting chicken and fresh bread. After dinner, we sat around the table, sharing stories, not just about loss, but about the small victories that made us feel alive. Geneva told a story about her first love, and the room erupted in laughter. For a moment, I forgot about the past, about the pain, about the secrets. All that mattered was the warmth of friendship, the comfort of being seen. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The city was quiet, the air crisp. I thought about Chuck, about Simone, about the letter that had changed everything. I wondered what he would think if he could see us now, me, Malik, Tasha, even Simone, all moving forward in our own ways. Malik joined me, his face serious. Mama, do you ever wish you could go back? Change how things happened? I shook my head. No. I wouldn't be who I am now if I hadn't gone through all of it. And I wouldn't trade you or your sister for anything. He smiled, relief in his eyes. I'm glad you're my mom. I hugged him, feeling the weight of the past finally settle into something I could carry. Not a burden, but a part of my story. As the leaves began to fall, I found myself saying yes to more things. Lunches with friends, new recipes, even a dance class at the community center. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. And as I watched Malik and Tasha grow into their own lives, I realized that the letter at Chuck's funeral wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning of a new chapter. One I was writing for myself, one day at a time. The first frost of winter dusted the rooftops, and the city seemed to pause, holding its breath before the holidays. I found myself reflecting on the year behind me, on the woman I'd become, and on the letter that had started it all. There was a time when I thought that letter would break me. Instead, it became the spark that forced me to face the truth, to let go, and to build something new. One evening, as I finished cleaning up after dinner, Tasha came into the kitchen, her poetry notebook tucked under her arm. She sat at the table, her eyes bright with curiosity. Mama, do you ever wonder what Daddy wanted you to do with that letter? Like what he really hoped you'd find? I thought about it, running my finger along the rim of my teacup. I think he wanted me to know the truth, even if it hurt. Maybe he hoped I'd find a way to forgive him. Or maybe he just wanted me to finally live for myself, not for his secrets. Tasha nodded, scribbling something in her notebook. I'm glad you did, Mama. I'm glad you found your own story. Her words stayed with me as I got ready for bed that night. I pulled out the letter, the paper soft and worn from so many readings. I didn't cry this time. I just smiled, grateful for the journey, for the pain that had shaped me, and for the love that had survived in unexpected places. The next morning, I woke to a message from Simone. She'd sent a photo of herself at a book signing in New Orleans, holding up a copy of my memoir. Your story is helping women here too, she wrote. Thank you for being brave enough to share it. I replied with a simple, thank you for being part of it. Our lives had taken different paths, but we were both moving forward, both finding peace in our own ways. As the holidays approached, I decorated the house with Malik and Tasha, stringing lights along the porch and baking cookies for the neighbors. Geneva came by with a wreath for the door, her laughter filling the house with warmth. We hosted a small gathering on Christmas Eve, inviting friends old and new, to share a meal and a prayer for the year ahead. That night, as the house grew quiet and the city outside sparkled with lights, I sat by the window and watched the snow fall. I thought about all the women who had reached out to me since my story was published, women who had found the courage to leave, to forgive, to start over. I thought about the power of truth, about the way a single letter could change the course of a life. I realized that in the end the story wasn't just about Chuck or Simone, or even the secrets that had come to light. It was about the choices we make when we're faced with the truth. It was about the strength to keep going even when the road is hard. It was about the hope that waits on the other side of heartbreak. As I drifted off to sleep, I wondered how many other women were out there, holding their own secrets, waiting for a sign that it was time to let go. I hoped my story would be that sign for someone. And now I want to ask you, if you discovered a secret that changed everything you thought you knew about someone you loved, would you want to know the whole truth, no matter the cost? Or would you rather hold on to the comfort of what you believed? Let me know in the comments below. Your stories, your thoughts, and your courage inspire me and so many others. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to my channel for more real-life journeys of strength, healing, and second chances. Don't forget to like, share, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. And if you've ever faced a turning point that changed your life, I'd love to hear about it. Your voice matters here. Thank you for being part of this community. Together, we're stronger than any secret and braver than any heartbreak.